So, so if there's one, you get one URL, and the one URL is archive.org. Jesus heal me. We're going to bring it on down to archive.org/software, the last URL you'll ever need for software preservation and awareness. Thank you, Jesus. So, I hereby apologize to everyone who actually believes at a revival about all the things there, because I'm going to parody it because I can't resist, because this is a revival tent in every single sense of the word. I like the out-of-the-box thinking, and so when you hear the wind go by and that stuff, I love it, okay? So my name's Jason Scott, and I've been around in vintage computing almost to the beginning of my life. So when I was like 8 or 9, my father would bring computers home from IBM because they were testing them. That's where I got my first Commodore PET. And then I got an Atari 800, I had an Apple IIc, later I got Apples. Now, of course, like many people in my field of hobby, I have a shipping container in my backyard, entirely full of all sorts of material. Maybe some of you outsource that shipping container, but in my case, it's sitting in the back, a 40-footer too. Let's not just go namby-pamby. And I actually had to have a Kickstarter to clean it up, so you know things are really getting out of complete control. And the reason that I have a shipping container is from an awful lot of saying yes over the last few years. And what that means is people contact me all the time, and they say to me, you know, I've got this stuff, and I don't really want to throw it out because it's meaningful to me, but I can't justify keeping it. So what do I do? And could you take it? And I go, yes. You betcha. No questions asked. Send that sucker right along. That's how I got 2,000 floppy disks from the Rhode Island Apple Users Group. That's how I ended up with dozens and dozens and dozens of conference proceedings from one of the co-founders of the GNU Foundation. And that's most certainly how I've ended up with 1,000 t-shirts from Randall Schwartz, one of the Perl gods. T-shirts, yeah, so in fact, I'm happy to say I just did the first digital archiving of those t-shirts. It's a lost cause, buddy, just sit down. So, we all want to fix things, don't we? Anyway, so, alright, so here's the deal. I started to use bulletin boards when I was in my early teens, and for some strange reason, perhaps my parents' divorce or some other reason, I felt that the world was built on shifting sand, and I was very aware of this at the time, so when I went to a bulletin board system, I would download everything off that bulletin board system onto floppy disks. I mean, everything. The menus, the messages, the postings on the what they would call G files, general files, which were supposed to be used for system information, but that people started to put up just crazy stuff about how to do all sorts of untoward things in their minds. And so I ended up with this massive collection, and by the time I went to college and kind of fell in love with the internet, I had a massive collection of something like a few thousand text files. And when I turned my mid-20s back to the bulletin board system era to say, what was up with those guys, I realized it wasn't making its way onto the web. And that really bothered me, because it was a big part of my childhood, and I was bothered in many ways that we were able to have all this other information about AOL and Fortune City, but we weren't able to have anything about, what about the Sherwood Forest BBS and Oceanine, and what about all these bulletin boards like Fido networks, and where is that? And so I ended up putting up something called textfiles.com. And textfiles.com at the time was just meant to be kind of a one-off museum of here's all these old text files I had. And I had some philosophies there that were very strong to me. I didn't put up ads. I didn't put up banners. I really didn't want to put up anything that got you away from getting right to your file. I didn't try to couch it in flowery language or make you try to work hard to get to it. A person could go in and go to the bottom and hit a .zip file at the bottom and be able to download the entire directory immediately. In other words, I wasn't trying to protect my hoard, my shiny gold hoard from the masses, you know. I wanted people to download it and re-experience it. And over the course of the last 14 years, it's been a lot of people who've come forward to me. What's scary is that there's people for whom I put it up just before they turned 13, and I was an important part of their life, and I've had engineering students tell me that's where they first got excited about engineering, and I've had people tell me that that was where they learned there was even a world back there. Now, the progression of this was that over time people said, hey, I've got text files, so it became larger. I've got ANSI files. Well, what do you do? Okay, I'll create artscene.textfiles.com and put up everything from RIP graphics to ANSI graphics to BMPs drawn by art groups, and we're just going to put all that up. Why not? Who's going to say no? I also ended up putting up something called audio.textfiles.com because there were recordings of phone freak conferences or obsolete sounds or recordings about bulletin board system commercials. In other words, it was multimedia. Finally, I came up with pdf.textfiles.com, the worst named of all of them, which is just PDFs of things that I thought are interesting about vintage computing. In the same way, there was this whole rising idea that there was a meaningful weight to these old computers. Now, as somebody who's dealt in this social group for many years, there's this one really unfortunate thing where somebody goes like, well, I like this because it's old, and someone goes, you think that's old? And they proceed to tell you how they literally pressed metal into electricity and made bits happen, right? And so on. And that's cute, and I like it. And one of the things I've discovered is that in everything from race cars to Civil War reenactments to groups that do maker kind of stuff, that's all there. That's not a vintage computer thing. That's a people thing. You get people near stuff, and people kind of get weird about their stuff. But I've always tried to transcend that. I tried not to be the owner of history. But what I ended up becoming, though, was a very easy touchstone and talisman, this loud, brash guy who goes ahead and says, it's okay to like old things, it's wonderful, they have a meaning to us, they have a cultural context, we are poorer for losing them, and an effort that's made to save them is a Herculean and heroic effort that should be appreciated and lauded. This is the basic stuff I've tried to get out to people who are like, why is this here? Which is a fundamental thing. When we go to a museum that has art, and somebody comes in with an old Renaissance master, the question asked by the curator isn't, why are you bringing me this? What is this thing? This is really obsolete. They don't even make them like this anymore. Why are we stuck here with this thing? At worst, they'll say, well, we don't take that, but here's 25 places that do, and they're all in contact with each other. In other words, the value is inherent. Now it's just a matter of what do we do with it. In fact, there's even an interest in forgery, both on the side of somebody thinks it's worthwhile enough to forge, and there's actually some value that's come across the years where people have actually gone, this was a really good forger. Let's do an art show of this forger. That ambient value, I think, applies to computers and software. I think we're slowly getting to that in this world. I think we're slowly getting towards that position where people are starting to go, that's interesting and old. Okay, all right. And they'll either be interested or not, but they won't question fundamentally the meaning behind it. And I think that's the work of literally thousands of people who've really kind of continued to keep track of their history. All right, so progressing back to my story, at some point early on, I had this silly idea. Anyone here not know what a bulletin board system is? All right, okay. So it's basically a computer with a phone line with a lonely person in front of it. And so what basically I thought was, wow, all these text files were BBS lists, and there were BBS numbers at the ends of text files. What would happen if I just collated them all? What would that do? How big a list would that be? And so I started to do that work, and thanks to the FidoNet list, along with a bunch of other ones, I was able to come up with a list of, in about 2 days, about 50,000 bulletin board systems, and roughly when they were up. Because this is the earliest known list, and this is the latest known list, and you were able to kind of create time span. And I created something called bbslist.textfiles.com. Well, that went up, that was in 2001, and it's been up ever since then. And I get 4 or 5 corrections or additions a week still to this day. And people are not just giving me their, and the entitlement of the internet is fantastic, because people will be like, you have my bulletin board system, the Pirate's Nut, listed as 1985 to 1989, 1984 to 1989. It'll be written I just totally failed to scope it out and didn't read far enough and made a bad assumption. Okay, anyway, so So a lot of it's done automatically, but one of the things that happened was I asked people to also be able to write comments about your bulletin board system. And people started to write these long comments. And what I really didn't understand is that bbslist.textfiles.com is a honeypot for people who blows their minds, right? They type in the name of a bulletin board system. This is what I wanted when I did it. Type in the name of a bulletin board system, and there's this pantheon of every bulletin board system from their local calling area, who ran it, and messages from people about what that board was like. And they're like, oh my God, whoever this guy is surely wants a 17-paragraph retread of what I did when I was 9. So I was getting these massive, massive stories, and I said, there's got to be something here. And I had a long dormant film degree, which I immediately went toss and went off to do IT, and I thought, I should make a documentary about these people. And 4 years later, BBS documentary came out, and that had 205 interviews, and it went on for 8 episodes, because if you're going to make the last and the first BBS documentary at the same time, you might as well be complete. So if you want a 40-minute episode on the ANSI art scene, or if you want a 40-minute episode on FidoNet, it's in there. People seem to like it. It's actually done very well. It's Creative Commons licensed. You can download it right now on your phone, and I won't get angry. And I thought, well, that was just way too general, though. How can I make this even more obscure? And I ended up going for a movie called Get Lamp. And it's called that because it was very specifically meant to be obtuse. So it's a documentary about text adventures that was shot in high definition. And it's all about, you know, Infocom and Scott Adams and a bunch of other aspects of that, but it's also about the craft of writing. So I became kind of known for that. And along with that also, I also got involved in an activist preservationist group. This is the latest thing since I've been here a long time. I'm the mascot, I call myself, of something called the Archive Team, which is at archiveteam.org. And what we do is when we find out a website is shutting down, especially a website that has a lot of user accounts, and they're giving them the standard 30 days after 10 years to get all their stuff off, we descend upon it with thousands of machines and execute a distributed preservation of service attack. And we download thousands and thousands and ultimately millions of accounts. And so we've been doing that now for 5 years now, and it's been fantastic. It got a lot of attention because people realized that all these promises that were made in the 90s about free to play on all these websites were now coming to roost. And entire swaths of human culture were being destroyed overnight. I believe very strongly in it. Now, somewhere in there I got fired. And that was awesome. I tweeted it. But I was fired mostly because it was a company that did hosting, and I wasn't where my heart was, and everyone knew that, and they were trying to save money on having people with any experience or getting anything over the minimum wage. So out I went. And I was at a juncture then, and I said, what do I want to do with my life? Now, what I ended up doing was a Kickstarter, which you can't do now, so don't do this, which was, if everyone gives me $25,000, I pledge to spend all of that money. But I'll spend all of that money, because you've all known me doing vintage computing, to do just vintage computing and completely realign my life for vintage computing. So, they did. They gave me the money. I finished GitLamp, made it available to them, so that was kind of the reward. And I got hired. I got hired at the Internet Archive. How many people here know? Okay, we're going to go with heard of the Internet Archive. All right. Have been to the Internet Archive. And I'm going to go with, what's the third one? Have been to the software part of the Internet Archive. All right. We'll go with that. So let's start up with where that happened. Once upon a time, there was a man who co-designed the chips on the thinking machine. His name was Brewster Kahle. and he was a genius. He had come from the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab, and he had studied under some pretty heavy hitters in that area, Marvin Minsky and Danny Hillis, and he got involved in thinking machines, which was meant to be a parallel AI-based computer. And that was good, and he did some work in software. But then when the internet rose up, he co-created something called WACE, which was kind of a proto-web. Let's go with proto-web in the same way that an Atari 800 is a proto-laptop. And it sold pretty well. Like, he ended up selling it out for a few $1 million, which made him, you know, not wealthy, but happy. And he turned around and got involved in another company, and the company was called Alexa. And the Alexa product basically allowed you to scan websites. It would scan all these websites and create rankings. In other words, it was like the Nielsen ratings for websites. And he sold that ultimately to Amazon for over $200 million, which, you know, makes him one of those dot-com millionaires we always hear about. Now, two things happened with this. First of all, for Alexa to do what it needed to do, it needed to download almost every website it could find from 1995 onward. Having finished that, though, and having the $200 million, he could have bought a really nice boat and sailed away. He could have gotten into golf, he could have gotten into ponies, he could have gotten into cars, he could have bought vintage aircraft and crashed them into each other while drinking a mint julep and watching it from his porch. Good men. Their families will be well compensated. But in fact, he said, when he was young, he had heard about the story of the Library of Alexandria, and it drove him insane that there was this story of a library that was unparalleled and that had burned to the ground, and we had lost all this information. He said, I will make a new one. And he registered archive.org and a bunch of other names and created the Internet Archive. Now, the number one thing I find about the Internet Archive being a problem, having joined them, was, first of all, a lot of people don't know about it. That is to say, they sort of know, or they remember something called the Wayback Machine, but they don't know what that is. In fact, I actually deal with people who think it's a government service, or think it's some sort of, backed public utility. It's not. It's a nonprofit run in San Francisco by a multi-millionaire, along with grants, along with some of the services they sell. It's a very, very small group of people, just a few dozen. But one of the things it has that a lot of other sites don't have, and a lot of other nonprofits don't have, is 45 petabytes of disk storage. Now, 45 petabytes is 45,000 terabytes. That's a lot of terabytes. So the thing is that it's got 17 petabytes as of last week of unique data split out around all of those drives. And what's on those drives is what I'm going to talk to you today about. Besides having many, many, many captures of websites, it also has a whole bunch of movies, it has a whole bunch of audio, it has a whole bunch of magazines, books, it's got pamphlets. It basically is trying to be the world's open access library. There are no banner ads, there are no interstitials, there's no special client you have to download. It's not brought to you by anybody obvious. It's not being a service. It's not Pepsi presents the internet. It's absolutely a nonprofit dedicated to downloading and uploading as much data as possible. And millions of people hit it every single day. You can stand by the machines that's in this massive building that they're in San Francisco and just watch millions of people download whatever they want. What kind of things do they have? I'll tell you a couple of my favorites. The one I always love telling because it always freaks people out, but to me is a perfect example is this. Okay, so in the Middle East, they have these imams, okay? And so the imams every week have these little RSS feeds they do. They get up for about 6 hours. They're like, whoa, goats are down, shepherding is up, kill these people, leave these other people alone, be nice to everybody, thank you, goodbye. Yeah. There are people who actually film the 6-hour speeches and then upload them to us. And we are downloaded by hundreds of thousands of people around the world and the State Department. So we're a huge conduit for that. We're also the conduit for thousands upon thousands of podcasts. One of the things that drives me nuts, and if you want to pass this meme along, please do, is I talk with people all the time about hosting, right? We have a weird thing about hosting, right? Websites have become kind of the de rigueur. We must have a website, and a website can be any size, but a lot of these places that do hosting have pretty variant terms, especially when you start to get a little goofy. So I have people who are like, well, Jason, I have some stuff, and I think it might be of use, but it's like 9 gigabytes worth of, printed material that I've scanned. And I'm like, that's interesting. I put up 9 gigabytes today by mistake. I have personally overseen or uploaded 800 terabytes of data into the Internet Archive. All right? Your stuff is a rounding error. It's important. It's vital. I want to see it. It's a rounding error. Stop thinking about bandwidth and disk space for your vintage computer material. I will take it. Flat out. No tricks. No promises. No signing this on the dotted line. We'll just take it. Okay? That includes video, AVIs. That'll include massive TIFF files. That'll include anything you've got. I'll take it. I just want to say that because that's my number one thing. Hand up in the back because this is a Q&A. Yes, sir. Okay, so your question is, hey, do you have any unique file scanning to verify so that you save space, right? Okay, so at this point, we'll take it all. I have 200 DPI versions next to 800 DPI versions. Doesn't matter right now. Because here's the problem, and I'll go into this right now then. So here's the problem. Imagine we didn't recognize, I'm going to use this again, we didn't recognize the value of statues until 2008. What would happen then? Let's say statues were used to push stuff over and people destroyed them, and yeah, you buy them, it'd be nice, but it was gone. What if we didn't recognize them as a historical force until 2008? I'll tell you what would happen. The British Library, the Smithsonian, all the companies that were involved in basically saving things, would drive around with massive trucks everywhere they could and go, got any statues? Anyone have any statues? No, we'll just take it. No, I don't want to, just give me the statues. I'll take all of your statues. We're going to become a large statue place. When Brewster hired me, Brewster said, Jason, we have over 2 million books online that can be read right now. We have many millions of audio files, including the massive Grateful Dead live archives. We've got radio shows. We even have movies. We have so many out-of-copyright movies up. We've got thousands of these movies, and we've got all these things. But we really fell down on software. We just didn't know what to do with it. Like in 2002, they made a mirror of the Two Cows archive, and they kind of left it at that. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I said, all right. Let's do this thing. The Internet Archive is the largest online downloadable collection of vintage software in the world. You will not find a larger one, I promise you. If you point me to one that you think is bigger, I'll download it and put it up too. Not even close. I have over 500,000 products up there. I've got thousands of cover CDs grabbed from both shareware CDs and the covers of magazines. We've got thousands and thousands of manuals, thousands and thousands of books, thousands and thousands of materials. One moment, your arm went up, but my mouth goes on. I'm going to keep going, buddy. I got to keep going. I'll get you at the end. Grab me at the end. So, here's the thing, right? So, why did we do that? Well, the answer was that we were in that danger of what I said before. That software was at this weird crossroads. It had this weird goulash of strange copyright status, lack of perceived value, people having lots of cool stuff and then having the nerve to die and have a spouse who didn't see any value in what was left in that part of that room. We ended up with a lot of lost history, and I said, okay, it stops here. First, let's grab it all. Let's put it all up, see who gets angry, see who gets elated, and move from there. And it's been going on now for about 2 years that I've been doing this. And so The first step was, like I said, go around and go, got any statues? And end up with massive statue collection. So we got a big massive statue collection. The metadata is crap. Metadata, if you're not aware of it, is the whole idea of the data that accompanies the data to tell you something. Because it's one thing to have a magazine, but how do you know what's in the magazine? How do you know who wrote for it? How do you know what it's going to cover? What about the text of the magazine? All of this other material is called metadata. I happen to believe in a pure techno-futurist fetishist way that automatic things will go through it like the robots in the Matrix and just figure it out. I think that it'll do some of that. In other words, like it'll go through, look at it. There's something called Sumify. I don't know if you guys are aware of it. That's my current example. Sumify is a patent set that Yahoo bought, and what it does is you shove 17 or 30 or 300 pages of text into it, and it produces paragraphs telling you what it's about. If that sounds like science fiction, OCR sounds like science fiction to somebody going back. It's basically the same idea. Is it perfect? No. But are they going to innovate it? Yes. Are the patents going to expire? We hope so. And so my belief is that you can't make the data better if you don't have the data. So I'm just doing it, okay? I've got a nonprofit behind me with an endowment from a foundation that is trying to do for software what everyone else has been doing for books and statues and paintings. And it's called the Internet Archive Software Archive. All right? So that's the first thing I really want you to know about. archive.org/software. Now, that's interesting. Okay, go ahead, do it. Okay, you and then you. Two bearded men with Van Dykes are letting me know they have questions. Adam first, and then you. Go ahead. Is your question the same question? Okay, so the question can really be summarized this way. Why are you not in Guantanamo Bay? Why are you not being frog-walked into a boat that we never see again? The answer is, we are a library. Libraries have been around forever, and they have done things that have been at odds with various people over the years. However, unlike a lot of other situations, if people are displeased with what that library is going, they talk to the library like a human being. They don't go in with fire and blazing, and well, sometimes they do, but so far, we've been really low. We've had one fire. Okay, fine, we've had one fire. I will admit that. The Internet Archive did have a fire. We did lose a little tiny bit of stuff and a lot of scanning machines, but we're back. But the fact is we get contacted by rights holders and people all the time. And those people say, we would prefer you not distribute that thing. We think of it as an active product. That group has been less than 1/10 of 1/10 of 1% of the data that's up. My attitude is, put up 500,000 things, get told to take down a few hundred, and leave the others up. That's my take. Is that stupid in the modern era? Perhaps. But that's what a librarian was doing in the 30s and the 40s when they would put all these books somewhere and let them go in for free. We're so used to it now, we don't even question them. But I will tell you that every single year, publishers work to destroy libraries. Publishers love e-books. E-books give books a lifespan. I talked to a librarian who has 350 people waiting in line to get a hold of the e-book version of 50 Shades of Grey. That is disgusting in a first world country, that's the case. That you can actually have that situation that there's no way to work with people in a way that lets them do this. And the fact is that the Internet Archive is an experiment. The experiment will survive or it will fail, but I'd rather not go to my deathbed going, well, at least I didn't make a fuss. So that's my take on that. It's a little bit more radical than others, and we'll see what happens. Every radical who speaks in a certain way does that. But it comes from this belief, okay? Software, in the aggregate, is an artifact, not always a product. If you believe that a software is here and forever a product, then there's a problem. Because we have so much software now that's on machines that are not sold, for companies that are not existent, written by people who are dead, And its half-life is much shorter than, say, books and oil paintings, but it is still the situation, and it's just going to get worse. So first, let's get it up. The letters are very nice. You know, people are actually very kind to us because they recognize we're not the Napster of books. We're this place that says, okay, access drives preservation. If people don't realize what this stuff is, they won't know it's good and worthy of saving. So, for instance, I don't know if any of you know of BitSavers. BitSavers is the work of Al Kossow and a couple other people. Al himself is in a dream job at the Computer History Museum. And Al is, you know, he's so dedicated to what he does. He basically goes through the computer history archives and scans whatever he can find and puts them up by himself. And I have a thing that dumps it directly into the Internet Archive. And so I can tell you it's 29,000 individual materials. Everything from books on how to operate the 3270, somebody's going to correct me, 3279 IBM terminal, all the way to memos that were put out by Xerox in the 1960s about, man, we ought to do something about computers. It's a beautiful bounty, and I've made sure that it just gets pushed up into the Internet Archive, along with a bunch of other such things. And, you know, when it comes to the work of people, I've tried to work very hard to recognize that this isn't me being all productive, right? I mean, there's thousands of people who over the last 20 years have furtively scanned every kind of document they can find, who've tried their best to take digital images. I always say that, I always get in trouble. Digital images of floppy disks, or I refer to it as digitizing floppy disks. Nobody likes it when I use that term, but I'm going to say it anyway. So making floppy disk images and making them available because the conversation ends when the material is gone. So first let's bring it up and let's see what happens. Now, let's talk about the second half of where I'm going with this, right? So I plead on you all, please look at archive.org/software. You will find thousands of things up there. If there's something you got a problem with, give me a mail. If there's something you're happy with, give me a mail. And if you want to make things, just give me a mail. Talk to me. But there's another problem there. If you go to the Internet Archive and you see a book, you can click on the book and read it online. We have a beautiful PDF. You click on a thing and suddenly you can read it right in the browser. It's amazing. And we are so used, right, to music and movies. You click on a piece of music and you hear it. That's crazy. We didn't have that in '92. That was a thing. You had to go find a player. You had to download it. It was in .au. .au sucked. And you were just used now to like, okay, well, I'll compare them. We just leave them running like water. It was like the tap. We're just going to leave music going. And we do that with video. We download video, but we don't do that with software. So I wanted to change that. So 2.5 years ago, I started a project that was insane. Utterly insane. Here was the idea. Find the best emulator I could and convert it to JavaScript. The reason I chose JavaScript is because it is currently the only cross-platform executable language that does not require a plugin and does not put you under Larry Ellison's thumb. It is this cross-platform executable that's legendary for being vaguely slow and not fantastic. I've said his name and now he comes. Anyway, so this March is now brought to you by Oracle. And Jason Scott will not be speaking today. Anyway, so here's the thing, right? So it turns out there's a program called Emscripten. Emscripten will take a compilable program and convert it to JavaScript. It is a work of art that it does this. And you will be surprised to hear that you can almost, in some cases, get 50% of native speed out of a JavaScript conversion of a program. They've actually done a huge amount of innovation. Something called ASM.js, which is basically a assembly language middle component to JavaScript, which is as crazy as it sounds. But we're in Crazy Town, you might as well meet the mayor, right? So the mayor of Crazy Town has Emscripten. So the best emulator that I could find was one called the Multi-Emulator Super System, which is called MESS. And MESS is a conversion of MAME, which many people now know. MAME is an arcade game emulator that is so good there are pages that have lists of what it doesn't emulate. It emulates over 32,000 arcade games. And it does them, pretty well, and they're now down to the dregs. I mean, if you watch their work in progress, they are down to the dregs. They're grabbing Italian clones that existed for like 9 minutes in 1996, right? They're way down to the dregs, but they're doing it. They're dumping them, they're making them work. And somebody said, well, if you can use the system to do video games, in other words, MAME Pac-Man gives you Pac-Man, why shouldn't you be able to do a computer system? It's just another thing. And so you come up with MESS Atari 800 Preppy. In other words, you can say, hey, run an Atari 800 that's running this. And that was 10 years ago. MESS currently emulates 1,600 different computer platforms. Now, does it do them all well? No. No. Let's not get that across. Some of these suckers come flying out with no skin and crash and land in front of you, okay? That's because there's always been this shadow over emulation, which is really sad, right? One of the most beautiful piece of software arts we've created is the ability of a machine to run other machines within it. And it's not given any respect because it's thought it was just a conduit for violation and misery and sadness. But what it is it's one of our last best hopes for emulating these materials far beyond the lifespan of the metal and the parts. So they've worked really hard, and some of the things are emulated really well. Apple IIs are emulated really well. Ataris are emulated really well. A lot of consoles are emulated well. They certainly can do a lot of older machines. They can do a KIM-1. They can do an Apollo. They can do a PDP-1. They can do a Dreamcast, but they can also do a Sega Genesis, a Sega SG-1000, and the Amber Pegasus. I would literally give $1 if someone could tell me what the Amber Pegasus was. What country is it from? That's worth a quarter? Okay. The Amber Pegasus was a Z80 base computer, of which they only made 100, in New Zealand, came in a leather case, and was wiped out like some sort of indigenous species when apples arrived on the shores of New Zealand. Okay? Well, the Amber Pegasus lives again. And I will guarantee that more people have utilized an Amber Pegasus online in the last 6 months than they ever did back in 1981 when the Amber Pegasus lived like the Pocket Fox for a few short weeks. Right? So it's not just about the sexy ones, the ones we know, the ones that we think about. It's the ones that otherwise we would never remember, like the Adventure Vision, one of the worst home consoles ever made. There I'm seeing people actually cross their arms and chortle in the audience thinking about the NTEX Adventure Vision, which had 4 cartridges, and its screen, I crap you not, was a set of 160 red LEDs that spun across a mirror, sending the image along reflective plastic to give you your video. They emulated that, so it lives again. When it comes to things that are sexy like the Apple II, they have the Apple II, the Apple II Plus, the Apple IIe, the Apple IIe, they have the Apple IIc, they've got the Apple III emulated pretty well just now. They also have the cards, they have a Mockingbird, they have the disc controllers emulated. They even have the CFFA 3000, the 3000 emulated. That's the compact flash adapter for the Apple II that was created. In other words, it is possible to take a compact flash image and put it into a emulated card that's in an emulated system that's running in this program. This is a mature, wonderful product. All right, so enough about MESS. Let's port that insanity to JavaScript. All right, it took 2 years, and we've set up a pipeline. When they come out with a new version of MESS, which they do about once every month, to give you an idea, they do between 40 and 60 bug or feature fixes to MESS every day. And we implement that, basically with each new release, which is about once every month and a half, and in about 1 day, we can have it running in something called the JavaScript mess. The JavaScript mess is a player. It's a player like a video player. If you put it into your browser, you can boot up a machine. I would show it to you right. Imagine I am blowing you away. Here's how it works. You go to archive.org and up at the top, under software, it says historical software or console living room. And here's what that is. Basically, I put up historical software. I'm talking Azalcabeth. I'm talking VisiCalc version 1.0. I'm talking Elite for the ZX Spectrum. I'm talking about things like Karateka. I'm talking about other programs that are part of our seminal cultural history that are as important as James Joyce's Ulysses or, anything that's going to come out of Thomas Pynchon in his life. These are important seminal acts that many of us have hundreds of hours invested in. You can go to this entry, you see the thing, you press a button, and you're playing it. In seconds, you are running an Apple II in your window. You're running an Atari 2600 in your window. You end up turning computer history into an embeddable object. That will be my gift to humanity. That is what I think is one of the most important things, is turn vintage computing into an embeddable object so that we can experience the past. Perfectly? No. As good as the hardware? Never. So if that's what you think, then yes, you're completely right. If you don't think that, then you're wrong. I find that people who are like, no, it's not Karateka unless my fingers are touching this curved plastic key on a machine that I remember my mother yelling at me for buying. That's fine. But I'm worried about 50 years from now, and I'm worried about 100 years from now. Who's going to have Karateka then? Well, we're going to have it, it's going to be in virtual. Is it going to be good? No, it's not going to be as good as 1920s movies look today. When 1920s movies, when they came out in 1920, are pretty awesome. Now they're pretty good. A lot of them are lost, right? It's good. And thanks to the fact that there's this pipeline of people working for free, there's constant improvement of the emulation as people show up. So for instance, they had a board that does something for speech, for the blind. And I had some blind users come, and those blind users noticed that the hertz was set wrong. They were like, it's a 48,000. It really should be 44. And they fixed it. In other words, my hope is that what I'm really setting up, though, is this feedback loop. This is also where you come in. I'm not just asking for you to play Karateka or to play Azalcabeth on a new platform. I want you to go in and be jerks to these people, and if luckily you have the skills to help them. I want that feedback loop to close because I've just given you a place that the emulator will show up and play. So, I put up 25 pieces of historical software. Waited to see who screened. Nobody screened. Put up 78. Nobody screened. Put up 1,000 console games for the Atari, for the ColecoVision, for the Sega SG-1000, for the Odyssey 2, and for a couple other systems. Somebody screened. And it was Atari, but it was a very nice discussion we had. So as a result, a certain number of games are not available to play, only to view. But here's the critical part. In talking with Atari, Atari's attitude was, we recognize your need to preserve what we are. We recognize that we are a historical force. We recognize that you are trying to do a good thing for good reasons. However, there are a certain percentage of our items we consider live products. We sell them for the Xbox 360. We sell them for the PS3. We sell them on iPad apps. These are products we are doing. You can, people might refer to them as, zombies, but this is this percentage. So once those 83 cartridges left, that left us with a mere 700 Atari cartridges up. Enough, I think, to give at least some percentage of idea of what it was like to play the Atari. So, I'm willing to keep going forward with this thing. I'm looking for people who are going to both play these things and tell us where we got it wrong. I'm looking for people who have caches of software that are perhaps not available. In the future, we will have it that you can download this thing like a player, so on your blog, you'll be able to basically say, I wrote this when I was 14, and have it playable immediately to people. And most importantly, there'll be constant, consistent improvement. Anyway, where else can we go with this? Here's my dream too, which I'm putting on this tape for one of the first times. Really what we really want, right, is we want it that you can go to us And these emulators will have read and write capability. This is entirely possible. I know this is possible. I've seen versions of JavaScript emulators that do this. So here's the dream. The dream is this. You go to us and you'll be able to go, today I feel like using an Apple II with a Mockingbird in it that has 2 floppy drives and a blank 3.3 disk. And it goes, boop. And there's your Apple II. Something you can teach people with, something you can do stuff. You save your program on the virtual floppy disk, and then you can save that floppy disk image on your local machine. Later, you can boot up your preferred machine again and reinsert the disk from your desktop. Now imagine doing that for 1,000 computer platforms. You might just become an expert in the Amber Pegasus. Do not become an expert in the Amber Pegasus. If you think everything else is a dead-end job, that is truly the dead-endingness of dead-endingness jobs. I don't think Amber Pegasus remembers making the Amber Pegasus. But if you want to do something else with your kids or with yourself or to teach or to learn or to capture, this is going to do that. That's my dream, right? That we're going to end up with a case where vintage computing is as ubiquitous and as easy to do as we do music, as movies, as books as text, and as internet hate. This journey has been fantastic, right? I'm 43 years old, and now every single waking moment of everything I do, every single day, is something I want to do. And a lot of it is for vintage computing. I wouldn't be this excited about this if I wasn't having the time of my life, right? So I'm a very happy person about this, and I even have blood pressure pills, so it all works out. So I'm working now on 3 more documentaries, because why? Make life easy, right? So the 3 documentaries, one is on the 6502 chip, one is on the medium of tape, and one is on the place of arcades. And I'm doing them all at once because I figure why not? It was kickstarted, and I've been shooting for a few years now, and it's been going along pretty well. I had the pleasure of visiting Bill Mensch down in the Western Design Center down in Phoenix, a wonderful man who remembers his history and still sells 6502 chips and never stopped. Fantastic fellow. People who know him know him. So I've been having the pleasure of meeting my heroes for many years, and I would not change a second of it. So basically what I'm saying here is I'm hoping that we're at a new dawn of software preservation, of software learning, and the ability of people to experience this stuff from their desktop or on their screens or with friends. Will it be bumpy? Sure. Will some people be angry at me? Of course. It's computer people. They are angry. But that's okay. I'd rather debate why did you do that than debate why did you think you were going to do that. Right? I'd much rather live that life, and that's where I'm living right now. Thank you for listening to a rant from a person who is very loud and very, very brash and believes in it so strongly, and I hope you understand where it comes from. It comes from love. It comes from loving these things when I first had my father take them home, from being the one of my 3 siblings who would not let the other 2 siblings near it, from keeping things and keeping things and keeping things because they were magical to me, and they were escape, and they were colorful, and they were plastic, and they were beautiful. And that's why we all assemble in a building near this, to be able to look at them again and love them again. I think that's a valid, real feeling, and I will never, never walk away from it. So, thank you very much. Preserved. I don't know how much time we have. I didn't check my clock because there was no clock on this wall. Not bad. That was a good one. That was long. I can take 1 or 2 questions before the next speaker. Yes. So, how are the documentaries going? Here's the problem. My first film was 205 interviews, totaling 250 hours of footage. Second movie, 85 interviews with 120 hours of footage. The third movie, DEF CON, which I just finished last year, that was 300 hours of footage. That was over 200 interviews. So for me, it feels very small, but I have several dozen interviews for 6502. I have many interviews for Arcade. Arcade is almost filming itself like some sort of bizarre Grimm Brothers fairy tale. The camera's like leaving me, and then it comes back with 75 hours of arcades. Arcades are not a problem, right? I mean, doing a documentary on arcades is not hard. And you're like, Jason, everyone's making documentaries on arcades. Why are you doing one? I'm doing one on the place, right? We don't need another capitalist love story about there used to be a lot of them. Now there are less of them. Now they're coming back. Now people play them at home. I don't really want to do that story. What I want to do is, why for 400 years have we made rooms where people put machines in them and other people spend money to spend time with those machines? You know, from the Mechanical Turk all the way up through emulators or building home arcades. Why have I angered you? Oh, great one! My heart is true! So I don't know. I want to see where that goes. Tape, I only have a few. That was a little too loud and revivey. Any other questions? I will be around all day to answer questions, make deals, and happily take criticism. We get better from criticism. Is this person raising their hand? Is this a question? It's a valid question? Oh, this is me 20 years ago. Hit me up. Do it. The emulator is located in our hearts. But the emulator is also located at archive.org/software. And if you click up to the top, there's a bar at the top, and it says Console Living Room, which are games, Historical Software, which is historical software, and Business Case, which is business software. So if your dad can take you to if your dad wants you to experience Atari Writer version 1.0, yeah, that's an exciting time. We all remember Atari Writer version 1.0. Well, it's up there now, and so is VisiCalc and the saddest Dow Jones stock ticker in the world. Yeah, it's been waiting. Something's wrong. I always say it's like Neo in the Matrix. I love running disk drive repair utilities on the emulator. Because it's like I'm the architect and it's Neo, and I'm like, your first question, while most pertinent, is least relevant. How is the drive doing? The drive is doing fine, Neo. There is no drive. So anyway, we're actually now to the point. We've actually now been able to prove like I said, once emulation comes into the light, there has been some amazing work done. They are now running emulators and emulators. They were able to run MAME version 0.1 in MAME. So, yeah, it's kind of emulatorception is happening. Any other questions for this particular venue? Yes, sir.
The examples we given have all been software which is meant for interacting with the individual, not personal computing. It's provided in small letters. So the examples we've given have all been personal computing,
right?
Various sorts. What do you do with the wider world of software?
Like when you say, okay, so when you say wider world, what do you mean? Like for instance, if it's savable, we're saving it.
Sure, you're saving it, but what are you doing?
Well, like for instance, I need a concrete example there, because
The software that ran CompuServe.
right, the software that ran CompuServe. So that's interesting. Like I said, first the truck metaphor, right? I'm trying to find the people who have all this old software and saying, no questions asked, I'll take it. If you need me to embargo it, I'll embargo it. If you need me to put it up and hide it and never let it go out of my sight and wait till we're all dead, I'll do that too. But I'm trying to be that guy who you really love from 1915, who was the one who ran around and grabbed all those books before everything disappeared. So we're trying just to get the data. My hope is that this aforementioned loop, right, will lead to things like, for instance, JavaScript has limited amount. Like, I'm not married to JavaScript. We're just close friends. I'm trying to make it that JavaScript is there's another thing called Dart, which is superior to JavaScript in many ways. It just doesn't have that adoption. There's Pinnacle, which is basically the portable Salt emulator, or I should say native client for Chrome, which does not have, it requires a plugin. it's obvious that we will, through our browsers, continue to execute native code, especially locally, at least for the foreseeable future. I will move, or people beyond me will move this emulator to that. In other words, I'm not so concerned about, wait a minute, what if you have something that uses a network? Right now you don't support the network. Well, JavaScript does allow a network, although you have to tweak things to do it. And I foresee a future where people will be able to use a terminal emulated in Atari 800 running on their browser that is connecting to a BBS running on another browser. I don't see that as being a big leap. I think you've got a lot of nerds who are really good at figuring out virtual computing. I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about right now is instant access, and I'm doing that through the mechanism of the browser. But I, more than anyone, know about kind of the unbelievable amount of customization, of uniqueness, of sometimes one-off copies of software that exist, of which the knowledge and the human aspect of knowing how it runs is in danger of being lost. I try to go about that multiple ways. Grab all the manuals, grab all the schematics, grab all the software, and try to interview the people. This is a Herculean task, and I want more people to do it. I don't mind if it comes out in self-recorded podcasts. However that comes, that information hopefully will persist. Will we lose stuff? Yes. But I'll tell you, I'm good friends with Rick Prelinger, who does the Prelinger Library, and a lot of documentaries use his work. And he's got a beautiful library of old stuff, and I was really struck by this book from the 19th century, and it was a book of logos. It was a book of logos of all of these seafaring companies from the late 1800s, and it was a registration of their trademarks. And if you go through this, you will realize that of these literally thousands of logos, of women looking out over the sea, and of ships crashing into moons and dragons, you realize this is the... Oh, we lost it. I'm over it emotionally. This is the last vestige of those human endeavors, which could have beautiful, huge stories that have been lost to time. Like, life is entropy and death. I totally get that. I'm living with it. I got it. What we can do is fight the entropy with work like this, on the software, books, everything else level. Eventually the sun burns out, we gotta work on that too. But right now, I'm like, gather everything, and then we're back to the shipping container again. Alright, I'll talk to all you guys. Thanks so much for sticking with that.